Hey, everyone, I'll call the March 14th, 2023 regular meeting of the Mill Creek City Council to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. How about Councilmember Cavallari lead us today?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Holtzclaw,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Vignal,
Here.
Councilmember Cavallari,
Here.
Councilmember Steckler,
Here.
Councilmember Allison,
Here.
Councilmember Duque,
Here.
Councilmember Paddock.
Present.
Before we get to audience communication, is there any objection if we move item 10B, the discussion on abandoned shopping carts, up to presentations? Following the,
Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
Apology for the interruption. It's actually item 10A.
oh, the encampment discussion.
Correct.
I'm sorry, 10A up to the presentations. Any objection? Okay, seeing none, the agenda is so amended. With that, audience communication and Ms. Heidel, you have the mic, name and address, 3 minutes.
Barb Heidel, 1401 144th Place. Thank you, Mayor. I wish to acknowledge what a fantastic job the passport personnel and Jody have been doing. Having observed a bunch lately, how they interact with customers, I'm amazed with their patience, kindness, and helpfulness. They go out of their way to assist people, especially when technically the passport office is closed during lunchtime. They come out to show and explain the process to renew or get a first-time passport. I'm so proud and admire the staff. They are true treasures and need to be recognized for the wonderful, friendly, professional, and extraordinary job they do. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Anyone else in the audience? Seeing none, anyone online like to address the council? Seeing a shake of heads negative. Okay, with that, we'll move right into our presentations. Mike, Todd, you can introduce this first presentation.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. We've got some guests here tonight from LDC, of someone you know very well, Clay White. He had talked to us a few months ago about the benefits of going after this middle housing grant as a way to do some of the funding, do some of the work along the path towards our comprehensive plan. This work has a deadline at the end of June of this year for us to be reimbursed, and they're making good progress on that. So this time I'm going to invite Clay to come up and give kind of a recap of what this is about and where we are and a little tour of some of the tools they've already got in place. Mr. White.
Good evening, council members. It's a pleasure to be here again. For the record, my name is Clay White. I'm the Director of Planning with LDC, and we are hired by the city to assist with this middle housing project. And so we're pleased to be here with my colleague, Samantha Adams, who's going to be doing a portion of the presentation. So we're going to switch back and forth a little bit and look forward to sharing some information with you. Whoops, I think we've got the wrong. Okay, so goals tonight are just to provide the council with a project overview and of the schedule, look at the key deliverables. We want to make sure that we understand the connection between this project and your upcoming comprehensive plan update. So one of the things when we came to you to look at this grant program was saying there's a lot of work that's being completed here that's going to benefit that work that you're going to be doing as part of your comprehensive plan update. And then, of course, answer questions from council. We've got planning commission because we're going to planning commission this week. So we had 2 decks and but they both work. So we'll utilize it. So the middle housing grant program was authorized by the 2022 supplemental state budget, and it directed Commerce to develop a grant program to support the adoption of ordinances to authorize middle housing types, along with conducting displacement, so housing displacement and racial equity analysis. We'll talk about a little bit tonight, but both of those items are part of new housing element requirements, which you'll be looking at as part of your comprehensive plan update. The city applied for and received a grant to complete some of this work. It's important to note that this project will not result in any legislative changes. There won't be an ordinance be brought before you. It's not going to result in any code changes, but what it will do is give the city a menu of strategies and potential actions that you could take in the future. So where I think the opportunity is if we can look at options that you may consider, then you could pair those with things you're looking at as part of the comprehensive plan, and then mix and match and figure out what would be best to kind of implement the community values and vision for the city. So just a ton of great information. And then also an opportunity to really engage with everyone in the city of Mill Creek early on and draw that connection to the comprehensive plan update. So we've got a really fast schedule. This project has to be completed by the middle of June. So we've already gotten going with the project website, some other materials that we'll talk about tonight, but it's got a very short burn. And then you're going to be starting your comprehensive plan update. Some of those actions have already kind of started to ramp up. And so that'll take off where this leaves off. Just for folks that aren't familiar, middle housing, also commonly referred to as missing middle housing, is defined as duplexes and triplexes and fourplexes and townhomes and stacked flats, which are condominiums. It's often referred to as missing because a lot of ordinances leading up to this last century prohibited this type of housing in single family neighborhoods. And it's often more affordable than single family detached homes. So it's kind of in that middle in the affordability as well. When you get to steel frame construction, higher density, it's more expensive when you get to single family detached homes. So it can provide some more affordability options for people that are looking especially to purchase housing. So as we've talked about before, planning is a balancing act. So it's, you're balancing state and regional requirements with substantial local deference, which is afforded the city so it can plan in a way that's best for the community. The city of Mill Creek is preparing to update its comprehensive plan. An important part of that is your housing element. So there's all these different things you're looking at. Planning for population and capital facilities and parks. Housing is a big piece of that community conversation that you'll be having this year and next year. So in 2021, House Bill 1220 passed, was signed into law, and it significantly modified those housing element requirements. So there's things that have changed since the last time you updated your plan. That's part of doing an update is reviewing for things that have changed since the law was changed, since the last update was conducted. Some of the new requirements relate to options for more middle housing, providing options for housing at all income levels. So looking at affordability, and then looking at things like housing displacement and housing equity issues. In addition, the update process will include implementing new regional policies from Vision 2050 and countywide planning policies. We've discussed those before. And so a lot of the policies you'll see from the regional and countywide level also discuss housing displacement. You'll see some common themes. And then, then you can kind of frame this up and shape it in a way that works well for Mill Creek. But, yes.
Sorry, just out of curiosity, I kind of think I do, but maybe I don't. What's the working definition of housing displacement?
Displacement would be where if for housing would be, and it's really not going to be much of an issue in Mill Creek, but in Seattle, for instance, if you have a 3-story apartment complex and it gets torn down, those folks are displaced from their housing, more expensive housing gets built, and they can't find a place to live. So we'll talk about it a little bit in this project that the displacement is not going to be a huge issue here, but it doesn't mean that you can't have policies in place of what you do. Especially, I think you'd see more of like jobs displacement, if a business gets torn down and something else replaces it, where does those jobs go in the meantime? So yes, Mayor.
I think we need to look into that. I had the same question, and I think the commerce guidance that came out helped answer that. And as I understand the definition, it's not just someone getting displaced, but then they can't afford to buy replacement housing in the same jurisdiction.
Correct. And that not only do you have that time period where something new is getting built, but what gets built is more expensive.
Right. You can't afford, the person being displaced can't afford to stay in their community.
Correct. There's some displacement mapping that's been done through the Puget Sound Regional Council. When you apply that, you'll see very low risk of displacement during this planning period for the city of Mill Creek. But in other areas, it's much, much higher because you're seeing a ton of redevelopment. Think of Linwood or South Seattle or all the areas where you're seeing light rail, less expensive housing is being replaced with more expensive housing. So how do you mitigate for those risks? at least we can provide some proactive tools as part of this project and say, here's a range of policies that you could consider as part of the comprehensive plan that fit the circumstances that the city will be planning for during the planning period. So just a little bit about public engagement, goals and objectives. So as part of this middle housing project, we're going to really be doing some strong engagement with the community, and we've set out some goals and we've been working with the city team. And so goal 1 would be that multiple interested groups in Mill Creek are engaged in the project. People are engaged in the project that vary in age, ethnicity, occupation, and housing tenure. We're looking to get feedback from multiple groups reflected in code and policy, which can be reflected in code and policy options. And we're looking at doing in-person events held at varying times to make sure that we can connect with a lot of people that would like to participate. And our second goal would be Mill Creek community members who have been or more vulnerable to racially disparate impacts or exclusion and displacement are thoughtfully and inclusively involved. So the city notifies community groups and community-based organizations about the project early in the process. That is part of the grant, that we meet with community-based organizations and other groups. I think what you're going to hear from Samantha is we're doing what's required by the grant, and then we're really wanting to even connect further with the community because there's such an opportunity here. These groups and organizations disseminate information to their constituents, and the city makes targeted efforts to people who rent, people who are under the age of 30, and people who identify as non-white. So looking at, people that maybe rent or are looking for opportunities to buy in the community and what are their struggles, people that are younger and having affordability issues. So just trying to collect as much information, and all this can come back to council so that you have this information as you're making, important policy decisions. And then goal 3 is that the Mill Creek community members understand the connection between the middle housing project and the comprehensive plan. So housing is a big important part of that project, and we don't want it to look like we're doing all this effort here and then ramp up new project. If we can make that connection for people and get them involved now, and then bring them into that process as well, that's a huge win. So we have the ability to start that engagement process now. And I'm going to have Samantha come up and talk a little bit about our engagement strategies and our public website.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Samantha. I work with Clay at LDC. I've been working on this middle housing project and specifically a lot of the engagement. So as mentioned, public engagement plays a large role in this project. There are numerous engagement strategies that we'll talk about and that are kind of already in the works. All of these have been developed as part of a public engagement plan, which has been developed with, the help of the city and LDC. And really the intent of the engagement plan is to set the goals for the project, develop strategies, and to identify what we're looking to get out of the community. So the Department of Commerce grant, like Clay mentioned, has requirements for certain groups that we must engage. But really we're going above those requirements and just trying to engage as many people as we can. Housing impacts everybody, and this isn't just an opportunity to talk about middle housing, but to try to get the community interested and engaged with more planning efforts that the city is working on. So some of these groups that the grant requires to engage are for and nonprofit residential developers, owners and renters across the city, and then community-based organizations. So there's a variety of engagement tactics with the intent of reaching these groups, some of which have already started. And the main intent of the public engagement efforts is really to understand what the city of Mill Creek likes and dislikes about existing middle housing. And this really gives insight to when making future decisions about middle housing, how can we make it aligned with the community's vision and values when it comes to housing. So the first thing that we have is the project webpage. Let me see if I can. So the project webpage is live, and This has information about what middle housing is, what does it look like? There's a link to our survey here that we're asking folks to take. You know, why are we talking about this? Why does it matter? So this site has a lot of good information and will be updated as the project, you know, moves along. Let's see, the next piece of it is this mapping tool that we've put together. And this is hosted on a separate site. And this is really just, this is an interactive tool where we hope that people can explore the city of Mill Creek and see where existing middle housing is. Again, what it looks like, how it's distributed. You can see here in this map, there's quite a bit. It's about 1,400 units. So the city of Mill Creek has a lot of middle housing already. It's about 16% of total housing units. And as you explore this map, you know, you can click on a neighborhood and it'll bring you to a short description of how many units, what type of units, what does it look like. So these are the Main Street duplexes located, you know, just at the town center. Let's see, I'll show you a couple more. And these vary. So some of these developments are all one type of middle housing. Some have a mix, you know, townhomes, duplexes. There's really a variety in Mill Creek, which is great. They look different, they feel different. And the intent in here is just to show people really how much there is. As we learn where there's capacity for more middle housing in the city, this map will be updated so people can see, you know, where in the future there might be more of these developments. So highly encourage you to come over to the site and scroll around. Let's see, and then third, we have a survey that's live. And this survey is really just collecting information on what types of, just a variety of questions. I think it's 11 questions. And we ask what type of housing people are currently in, what type of housing people would like to see more of, generally what housing issues are people facing. So, you know, if renters are trying to buy, is it size, affordability, just what are people experiencing? So that's that. I guess I can go back to the PowerPoint now. Okay, so the engagement strategies on the screen are kind of in the works. Some have happened, some have not. The next one I'll talk about is interviews with CBOs. So these are the community-based organizations, and these are in-depth conversations the project team will be having to learn from community organizers and leaders about what they're hearing and seeing on the ground in the community. Yeah, so local churches, Boys and Girls Club, Mill Creek Community Association, food bank. There's a whole bunch of them. These are groups that may or leaders that may know a lot about housing, but do not necessarily attend meetings or are aware of when ordinances are passing. Let's see. Then there's going to be a number of events that we attend. We're planning on hanging out outside a couple of grocery stores, trying to talk to people, have our survey up, just make people aware of the project. We're planning on attending the Easter event, so talk to hopefully young parents and catch them there. We've learned that there's a large attendance at the electronics recycling event, so hoping to talk to a bunch of people there. And then Clay will talk a little bit about kind of the tour of existing middle housing and the city and planning commission meetings. And then I guess lastly, so the kind of advertisement for this engagement has begun in a couple of different ways. There was a piece written for the Mill Creek Quarterly magazine, which I believe this quarter has gone out. There's an upcoming citywide mailer that will be put together and we'll have some information on the middle housing project, point people to the website, QR code to the survey, that kind of stuff. And then we have informational flyers that we're hoping just to scatter across the city. So, yeah.
Would you like us to hold our questions till the end? If I had some about Stephanie's presentation, can we wait?
That would be fine. And
Yeah.
I've only got like one more slide and then we'll
Yeah.
have questions. Can switch back.
Okay, thank you.
So part of the importance of being here tonight is one is we want to make sure as we're sending things out to the public that you're well aware that's happening. So when you get asked questions at the grocery store or somebody wants to talk about housing, you can also then direct them that we've got a great website and we're collecting information and we want to hear everyone's voices as well. So spreading that message as well. This is coming here tonight is really letting you know the project's launched. Here's the goals. This is what we're doing. And then hopefully we'll be back in late May or early June. We'll find a date and talk about like, what are the results? What did we learn? How will that connect to the comprehensive plan update? So we'll kind of do a before and after presentation. So if you kind of take a look at the menu of strategies that we'd be looking at is, where middle housing currently exists. I think it's amazing. Like there's so much middle housing within the city mixed within neighborhoods. And if you just drove by, you wouldn't know that it's all there. So I think part of really highlighting where housing exists right now is that people, I think in the city might not know it's there and they'd go like, oh, I mean, I like those neighborhoods, or I've got a friend that lives there. We probably all know people that live in middle housing within the city. And it kind of breaks down that barrier that this type of housing, maybe be excluded in some neighborhoods because it's here, it's really mixed in, it's just done really well. Take a look at where residential zones where it's not currently allowed. Reasons why middle housing is or isn't being built. So, I mean, if you can solve that, if you're trying to encourage more, look for those pain points. Where there's capacity for additional residential growth. So we'll be doing like a land capacity analysis to kind of highlight areas of the city that could be developed or redeveloped. And if those areas currently allow middle housing, and what options, if you wanted to incentivize it or try to provide more, like here are some things you could do if you wanted to. And you don't have to. Currently, middle housing is allowed in all residential zones. It's just not necessarily incentivized. So that may be why you're not seeing it built over single family detached units, because people are going to build those typically. So we'll give you a bunch of options there. And we'll also do a housing affordability review. It's really nice to be able to see if you're in a certain job, this is what you might make. And this is what you could afford. And just so you can kind of see what the difference is between a single family home or a condominium at the golf course, or what that might look like if you're looking for a duplex. So we'll provide some affordability information as well. We're going to review the current regulations for opportunities. So you'll get that as part of this, and then that can be worked in the comprehensive plan update. And then the engagement will be an important piece as well. And then we can roll this all up into that comprehensive plan update that will be moving forward this year. So hopefully this is an opportunity to pull out housing out of that bigger conversation and really engage the community on it, and then just kind of work it into that bigger conversation. So that's where we're at. I think at this point, we're just rolling out those engagement tactics, and we're on a short timeline with June, so we can answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Clay. Questions, John?
Yes, I had three. One was on the term on your targeting of engagement.
Mhm.
When I was listening to this, it sounded to me like we're really targeting the particular users that would be familiar, would utilize middle housing, could benefit from middle housing. And I think that's great. But one of the issues that I want to have is I'd like to make sure that we're also targeting the rest of our residents specifically, so that they have a chance to be part of the conversation. Those people that, maybe live in a single family resident, but the ones that always oppose this because they don't really understand what it is.
Mhm.
So I would like to see, I would recommend, but yeah, that's all I can do is just recommend that we really target in that engagement also the non-users, so that they have a chance to listen, to understand, and to provide input. as to what works and what doesn't work. And we might find that certain types of middle housing is much more applicable to our residents than other types of middle housing.
Yeah.
And I would, just a thought.
Could I answer that one first?
Oh, sure.
So I think you'll be happy then with what we're doing, because what Samantha was bringing up are things that align with like the grant requirements of connecting with community-based organizations and renters and those that may be looking for housing. Good to hear what they, from them, so you can help inform the council. But we're also doing, the outreach in the magazine. We've done the website. We're doing the survey. We're going to be doing those engagement tactics to connect with the entire community. And so that is one of our goals, is to bring in everybody that wants to have a voice as part of this process and provide feedback on how.
That'd be great.
So hopefully
And
that
just to
happens.
be as clear as possible, that we're making the effort to reach out to those individuals where they're not forgotten, because sometimes they had a chance to respond to the online survey, but they didn't know what was happening, type of thing.
Correct.
Right. So if there was a little bit of an effort to reach out to those individuals, I think that would help our community to embrace this. Because we do have, as you mentioned in my second question, 16% of our total housing is mental housing. So is that like incredibly good? Is that normal? Is that low? What is that in comparison?
I haven't taken a look at how that compares to other cities, but I'd say it's pretty fantastic.
That's what I would think. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's really good, and one of the things I think that is also some really strong characteristics, it's not in one area, where single family is separated from other mixed housing types, is blended in with single family neighborhoods. And so I think that's also a strong characteristic. So when you're looking at like housing, equity issues I think that you can make a case that you're addressing a lot of those with your current code and regulations. And so, no, I think the city's done a really good job.
As ignorant as I am, I look at that map that came out in the magazine and I saw it again in this presentation. A lot of those areas that do have a lot of middle housing are older areas that before we incorporated and started putting down more restrictions and developers were developing. So like the MCCA area has a lot of middle housing in there, a lot of townhomes and multi-structures and duplexes and that type of thing. And that's because they were, the developers went to town on it a long time ago, I think. But just a thought as to where we put this to balance out our area would be great. My last question, I'll give somebody else a chance here. You made a statement that you can build middle housing in single family zoned areas today. Is that correct? Or is that something that's in the legislature right now?
No, in current Mill Creek code, you can build.
In Mill Creek code, okay.
Yeah, so it's current. It's just not incentivized in any way. So so in other words, if you could have 3 units on a large undeveloped lot, you could build a triplex, or you could build 3 single family detached homes. And so most of the time you're going to build 3 single family detached homes. So that's what's now, if you wanted to see more middle housing, then we could look at options that you would incentivize someone to build that type of housing, whether it be density incentives or other things that would encourage someone to build a duplex, and it only counts as one unit towards density. There's a lot of tactics that you could think about if that's the choice that you make. So
That answers all my questions. Thank you.
yes.
John, to your second point, I think it's also a big function of Mill Creek starting as a master plan community. They started with a blank slate and they
exactly.
intentionally planned it that way.
Yeah.
Councilmember Allison.
Yeah, I just wanted you to explain the timeline for the engagement one more time. Does it go through like mid-May?
Yes, and so we've already started, websites live, already getting materials out in the magazine. We'll be doing community events through May. So, and then wrapping up in June. So if there was something that happened in June, there's no reason we couldn't do that, but it may not tie into the final conclusions from this report. But if it bridges the gap with the comprehensive plan update, I think there's going to be a seamless transition between the two. So yes, we'll be moving all spring.
Other questions? Okay,
Sorry.
do you want, Mike, did you have something further? Okay. Pitch to get more money elsewhere.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I am Torrico. I am the Planning and Development Services Manager. About 2 weeks ago, I was having a conversation with Clay, and he mentioned to me that Commerce had some additional money that they wanted to give to jurisdictions for the middle housing grant that they have unspent. And so I had a conversation with Commerce on last Friday. And yes, we have the opportunity to receive an additional $50,000. What we'd like to do is use some of that money to expand the community engagement piece by doing a direct mailer to every citizen in the city. So that's, when you count for materials, postage, all the work behind it, it's about $20,000. The other piece we want to do is our zoning map and our comp plan map that we don't have the data behind it. It was created by somebody that used to be in public works that had they sort of like doing that kind of stuff. And so we'd like to use some of the additional money to create the shape files that create the map. What we can do with that, then we have that data, then Clay and his team at LDC can use that to do some of the capacity analysis. We can use it during the comp plan process. And then when we eventually go and develop our own GIS system, whatever direction we end up going, we have the data. We don't have to pay to have it created. And this also allows us to preserve the money that was budgeted for the comp plan. So we don't have to spend some of that money to create those shape files, and we can use grant money from the state to do that. And so what I'd like this evening is to get the council to give us sort of permission to go ahead and formally ask for the money. And I believe we need to do it through.
Yeah, the slideshow disappeared. I don't know what happened there, but Joe, can you pull that back up for us again? It's the last couple of slides on that.
Roger that.
It's the very last slide. It has a suggested motion.
Is it the same time limit as the funds we already have?
Yes, we'd have to spend that money by the end of June. And so we'd only use those on very specific tasks so that, we could get reimbursed for that money before the time is up. So there's a lot of work that has to get going, but we can get it done.
And there it went.
Keep losing it, but
There was and there went.
It was there.
yeah.
There
So,
you go.
so what we're trying to do, council, is keep in the theory of if we're going to ask for grant money, you need to agree on what we're going to go do. This is an enhancement because the Department of Commerce has extra money. It's a weird deal where they're saying, if you want up to 50, ask for another 50, we'll give it to you. If we don't spend it all, we just don't get reimbursed for the full 50 because we won't have spent the full 50. So we're not asking to go spend any of the city's money. This is a chance to spend the Department of Commerce's money. If you say go ahead, Al will get that paperwork submitted, and then we'll work with LDC to look at how we change their contract. And that will come back to you as a contract amendment to say we're going to spend more money on specific tasks with a specific set of work. But particularly it's those two things, that the ability to get to every household, as Councilmember Steckler is asking, this is a great way to do it. Get a mailing to everybody. And in the process of doing that, collect some people who'd like to stay in touch with us for DRCC or comp plan or other things too. So this is a kind of a once in a lifetime chance for free money to do a full city survey.
Councilmember Cavalieri?
Thanks, Mayor. Hey, thanks for bringing this presentation to us. And I'm always about free money and just as long as there's no strings, that there's no other obligations, just a continuation of the old grant. So good job finding this money or however it was conceived. So I support it.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
I suppose you need a motion.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
I move to authorize staff to pursue additional Department of Commerce middle housing grant funding for additional customer engagement and GIS shapefile work to be completed by June 30, 2023 and fully reimbursed by grant funds.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll move on to our other item, the different form of housing, I suppose. We'll talk about encampments.
Evening, Mayor Pro Tem virtually. Hello, how are you? And council, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. We're going to have a little discussion about encampments on public and private property. This is originally slated for a study session, but this is actually more of a presentation, so I appreciate the council moving the agenda. The agenda for tonight is we're going to talk about impact of encampments, some of the locations throughout the city, the difference between public and private property and how we're handling those. The new storage camping ordinance was a big help for us from council recently, and then the next steps moving forward. So as many of you know, there's been an increase in individuals experiencing homelessness in Snohomish County. As a result of that, several individuals have found encampment locations here in the city of Mill Creek. The debris from those encampments, can be a nuisance, a public health and safety concern. Some of these camps are located in native growth areas, and so they're near streams and creeks. And so we're concerned about that as far as the environment is concerned. This is one of the examples of an encampment that was found near North Creek Trail. During the summer months, when a lot of these encampments started to pop up, they were very difficult to see with all the foliage in bloom. They're set back from the trail quite a distance. So when fall and winter started to make itself more prevalent, and the foliage started to move, we started to see some of these camps. And we also got a lot more reports from citizens because they were seeing them more often from the trail. So the impact, like I said, creates several concerns, impact safety, environmental stewardship, and public health. There's quite a concern about these encampments and how some of the public safety issues are addiction issues that may leave debris such as sharps around the encampments, as well as many other public health concerns. And these encampments may lead also to an increase in some of our property crimes. That is a very high possibility. So several camp locations throughout the city, we were able to locate 4 or 5 encampments along the North Creek Trail. Like I said, several feet off of the trail, back in the native growth areas where you couldn't see them until the foliage started to fall from the winter months. There's also a camp behind the QFC area, back where that washed out property is back there, where that retention pond is. There's 2 camps there. There's also the camp in the 3300 block of State Route 527 that can be seen from 527. That's directly across from Irmina Sports. There's a property there next to the beaver pond that we're so familiar with. So we're working with that homeowner, and also the Sunset Lane neighborhood, which had an encampment there. They're in a very unique situation. I'll get to kind of describe that to you a little bit later. But that is also one of the other camps that we've been made aware of. So like I said, the public property city ordinance really helped us out with the storage of or camping or storage of goods on public right of way. And so that ordinance allows us to remove those individuals after being provided an opportunity for resources. If they're not able to move right away, we will then post those properties or those campsites, those encampments. And then shortly thereafter, we can come back and remove their belongings after giving them an opportunity to find resources or move their items. So that has been the biggest help to us as a department as far as addressing the encampment issues on public property. So again, we've been looking to identify resources. We've been working with leads quite a bit, law enforcement assistant diversion. We've had some trouble finding resources through other social services such as Compass Health and things of that nature. We are continuing to look for those, but LEAD has really been a great asset for us. And I'll speak to that on a little bit more on the project that we had. But the public property enforcement, like I said, we can go out to these places, these encampments, identify them as on public property, post them, and then remove them within 14 days of the posting. This is an example of the public property notice that we're putting on at campsite, posting at campsites. Private property becomes a little bit more complex. First of all, we have to verify if the property is private or public. And we are doing that through plot maps. And once we're able to verify if it is private property, we start looking to the homeowner for an advanced trespass notice. A lot of times we go to these encampments and we won't find individuals there. But if we have that advanced trespass notice on hand, we can then address it with individuals that we do find if we're so lucky. So this also, when we go out to these camps, we're also trying to provide that option for resources when we originally show up. So we'll offer the individuals resources through social services. And if we cannot provide them with, if they're not interested in those resources, then we trespass them from the property. If they remain on property, they would be subject to arrest in violation of the trespass RCW. And this is just an example of the private property advanced trespass request. So on February 24th, we had a great opportunity to meet with LEAD and have an outreach operation. 2 locations on North Creek Trail that were identified as public property were contacted, as well as 1 location on that was also off the North Creek Trail that was a private property location. We did happen to have an advanced trespass notice request for that property. So we did end up contacting several individuals there. They were contacted, and actually some of them decided to take resources from LEAD. So we contacted 6 individuals. Of those 6, 4 were accepting of resources, and they were taken by LEAD counselors, and we're hoping that they're well along in the program. During that time, we also went to Sunset Lane, Thomas Lake property, and we also went to the DOT property, and we posted a few sites. The private property is an issue, like I said. Sunset Lane is a very unique situation where they do not have an HOA, and they have 37 residents there. And so the area where the encampment is located on Sunset Lane property is actually 1/37th owned by each of the homeowners in a native growth area. So you can imagine trying to obtain 37 different advanced trespass requests, because when we go contact an individual there, if there were an individual there, we would have a really tough time determining, you know, whose piece of the property were they actually on. So, and that's how these things can be brought out in a legal battle and within a criminal court case. So fortunately, there hasn't been an individual at the Thomas Lake Sunset Lane area for quite some time, but that still leaves us with the encampment debris. So that's really what we're trying to work on now, is how do we address the encampment debris? And that's what we're trying to work towards, council member. It's one of those things that staff is working on, and I'll get to that in just 1 second. But this is one of the encampments that's also past the North Creek Trail, off to the side, well back in the area of the setback. So again, the cleanup of these locations, the public parcels, the cleanup is very well within our means as a city moving forward. But the private property, we're looking at city code, and we're still trying to determine if our city code provides us with the ability to have those encampments cleaned up, initially paid for by the city, and more than likely, if not, possibly have the city talk to the homeowners about, or work with the homeowners about restitution on those, reimbursement. So moving forward, the department is going to continue to prioritize the detection of these encampments and offering those inhabiting those encampments with some type of resource. We're going to utilize volunteers also to help us with that. You know, volunteers do help us with park patrols from time to time during the daylight hours. And we're going to try and train them to recognize the signs of an encampment, and then have them with the ability to contact an officer who can then make contact at the camp. We're also going to use, try and build our social services resources, trying to work with Compass Health, build on that relationship with LEAD, as well as identify other resources that we haven't identified yet. And we're also working to procure contracts with contractors that clean up encampments. That's going to be coming forward to council here shortly with some ILA possibilities. Some cities have already contracted with certain vendors to clean up these camps, and we're hoping to take advantage of those contracts. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions? Councilmember Duque?
So as someone who lives near the Sunset Lane and whose neighbors are who constantly talk about this to me, if not on a daily basis, because our kids wait at the same bus stop. There are still people, or there is someone still there who comes in and out. During the summer, it seems like there's just more parties. Seems to be the case with it, so it might be due to colder weather. I personally, with a couple of the members of that neighborhood, have walked and knocked on every single door just a couple months ago to be able to get signatures or email addresses. And it's as and Chief, I want to say Chief White and the police and city manager have been fantastic in communication, trying to get this taken or trying to figure out next steps. It is very complicated with that 1/37th of how to figure it out. And I'm really impressed, and I'm very thankful for the thoroughness of this presentation to us, and especially detailing the next steps and making it clear what needs to happen. It's a difficult situation for everyone. The majority, just so that you know, there's one particular house that has a small child who that's their backyard that they see directly into. And so it's not just like a kind of like maybe offside or around, like they can see from their kitchen and they see things happening, and they don't feel comfortable having their child in the backyard. And it's tough because it's private property next to private property, because it's, you know, the property where the Albertsons is, and I can't remember the owner, that just changed hands, but there's also a daycare that's right there. That their playground area is in that same section. So I really appreciate the thoughtfulness and you working on this and trying to resolve it, because it's not clean cut, and I know we wish it was. And so thank you.
We've been out to the site several times. We haven't been able to contact or locate any individuals there. But, you know, they move around, and so it's hard to figure that out. You know, the most recent time we were there, it looked as though it had been fairly abandoned. So we're hopeful that that's the case, and we're going to try and do our best to address the cleanup efforts.
Councilmember Paddock? Do you have another? I'm sorry, did you have, oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, I know initially when I spoke to when the homeowners first reached out to me, because they knew I was on city council and we pass each other when we walk. And then later when they came to speak, one of the original concerns was, I think they either got a citation or they got a notice about the fence being broken in terms of, I can't think of the word. But when something, you know, the city contacted them about it, or there was something along those lines that they needed to update that fence. And the homeowners who had been living there forever all said that their usual kind of track record had been the city would fix it and then just charge all of them. And they seem to want to move forward with that direction. And I know that doesn't mean it was everyone. And I also know that I have spoken to staff who we've all made clear that that's not how it should have been happening. That's not the direction to go. But I just want to acknowledge that there are a lot of people who've lived there since it was built, before it was part of any, part of the city. But there are a lot also of newer homeowners who didn't even know that that land was theirs, or because it's multiple green area, like they had no idea. So I was telling them something that I had only learned about the day before. So it is just very tricky. So thank you.
No, you're welcome. We did meet with several of those residents here in City Hall. And, I'm happy, Director Todd and I will have some conversations to see if that's a possibility. We did, I believe, recognize that the fence is owned by the homeowners there, and not Thomas Lake Center is who you're referring to. So happy to have those discussions with them in the future.
Councilmember Paddock?
Thanks for the presentation, and just echo the care that and thoroughness that you put into this. The 4 of 6, is that typical in folks as a percentage that typical of folks taking services? Is that pretty high?
That's extremely high.
Yeah.
We were very happy with that success rate. The lead counselors were very happy with that. I will say that I was recently at a meeting with police administration, and there was some discussion regarding the LEAD program, and Mill Creek is one of the largest referrers of services to LEAD. And so I'm very happy and pleased with the officers taking that approach. to this concern that we have. So we'll continue with that process. A lot of social contact referrals heading that way from our officers. So it's great news.
Is there any insight or reason why Compass didn't want to participate? I think you had mentioned there was some outreach and.
I think it is a bandwidth issue. This type of social work is difficult to find staff. So I think that they're just having a little bit of a bandwidth issue and being able to identify capable staff that can go out and take this on. A lot of the agencies have gone into contract with a lot of these social service providers. We're just a little bit behind the curve on that, and we're trying to rectify it.
It sounds like you're on the right track, and I just really want to commend you and the department for recognizing that the suffering is obviously the unhoused individuals, but also the community, the businesses, our neighbors, and it's a holistic problem. And appreciate your care in that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Allison.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo, great job. You know, it's not just you, it's obviously everybody in the department that, has taken this mindset, engage, get services. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cavallari.
Thanks, Mayor. Chief, how amenable have the private landowners been to, I don't want to say oblige us, maybe it's a poor choice of words, but to be willing participants with advanced trespass notices, so we're not having to try to really overthink this when we get to that point. I don't know what that echo was.
So that's my problem.
That shouldn't,
we may have it
doesn't
fixed.
affect it anymore.
Thank you, Joe. They are accepting to the process. I think that most of the property owners want to have this addressed and cleaned up. Nobody is opening their property to encampments. And so the easiest way for them to address and get it resolved is to go with the advanced trespass request, which allows us to remove the individuals. And then hopefully we'll be able to identify a means for us to work with them to get their property cleaned up from the encampment.
And my next question is not really, well, it's not really a question, it's more of a comment, is that I'm hoping that at some point we also, I know I've had a private meeting with the chief and city manager. I hope that we can have a discussion up here about the use of ARPA funds to perhaps purchase a drone or two, or perhaps even a bike or two, that we might be able to respond a little more immediate to these situations before they are full-on encampments, that we can be a little bit more proactive and ahead of the curve. And I think ARPA funds would be a great one-time use to get some folks trained, get the proper tools that are out there to really get a bird's eye view, a good picture, and try to stay ahead of this. So at some point, I hope we see a presentation for some new toys, if you will.
Thank you, appreciate it.
You say bike?
I said plural.
Any other questions, comments? Not seen any. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Appreciate the presentation. Okay, I think I'm turning it over to our legislative committee and the city manager for, am I on? The legislative update, item 8A.
I think we had some old business, Mayor, 7A, which is the adoption of our city.
Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. I crossed that out already. You're correct. So this is the item we had on the agenda last week. We had talked previously about formally adopting the revised vision, mission, and the core values that we discussed at the retreat in January. And so in your packet was the missing resolution from last week. And so is there any questions, comments on the proposed resolution?
We're minus one council member, but I'm happy to make a motion.
Make it slowly.
Mayor, I would propose that we approve the revisions to the city's vision, mission, and core values as stated on this document here.
In the proposed resolution.
Second,
vision, mission, and core values.
second,
Stephanie, was that a second? Just so that we're clear in the record, I think at the end of the packet, there is an actual resolution. I just want to make clear the resolution. The motion is to approve that resolution that's in the packet.
That's correct.
Okay. Is there any,
Mayor, the proposed resolution's on page 29 of the packet.
thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion? This is the resolution to adopt the revised.
We have the mission vision just for the record, read, I know it's in our packet, but for the audience.
Does anyone, I don't have the packet handy. Does anyone?
Would you like me to read it, Mayor?
Yes, please.
Yes, I'll start with the vision, revised vision, which we shortened. Provide exceptional community experience that brings people together. A city where people are safe, natural beauty is preserved, neighborhoods flourish, businesses thrive, and recreational opportunities abound. The mission: provide outstanding public services in a fiscally responsible manner. And we revised our core values as well. There are 5: integrity. We create trust through honesty and transparency in our working relationships. Respect. We work in a professional environment that honors the value and dignity of all individuals. Collaboration. We support shared goals through flexible, adaptable, and inclusive actions. Accountability. We are responsible for our actions and decisions. Perseverance. We are committed to overcome challenges and achieve successful outcomes.
As stated, I'm prepared to move that to the floor for vote.
Second it?
Any further discussion on the motion?
I just had one comment I wanted to make,
Yeah.
and I was gonna make,
Go ahead.
I was gonna ask this question last time. And maybe it's actually an admission of false reading. When I originally read this, the proposed changes, I looked at the core values and I thought, there's nothing in there about community or citizen engagement and whatnot. But the mission and the vision clearly calls out the importance, and it is the mission and the vision to serve the citizens. The core values are just how to get there. And I want to just commend you for putting that together and admitting out loud that I was wrong in thinking otherwise. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Is that an aye, Stephanie? That's an aye. Any abstentions? Motion passes 7-0. Okay, now we'll get to the legislative update. Martin, are you going to start us off?
Yeah, first I want to just kind of outline the intent of having this as new business. Typically, we would have an agenda on this, and it was intended to be the tool that we use to bring forward any new bills or initiatives that come across. And then we would have an agenda written that would give council an idea of prior to the meeting of what the initiative or bill entails. And then that would be an opportunity in the subsequent council meeting to take some action on supporting or opposing or what have you. The report function of the agenda would be where we would report on existing bills or initiatives that we have been discussing, or the ones that sit on our tracking sheet. So we can report today on this under new business, or we can wait till the report section, but I just want to outline kind of what we intended.
Let's do it now.
Thank you. And I'll hand it over to the Mayor Pro Tem, who is the lead of the legislative committee, to start off with her reports. Thanks.
Thank you, City Manager. My report tonight is mostly going to focus around House Bill 1110. And we need to have a small discussion, and I may need to pull in Mayor Holzclaw and Director Todd for that discussion. Now that this has passed through the House and headed over to the Senate, we delved into some of the last minute amendments, and we feel that we're circled back to where I had first questioned, if you remember, whether or not we are part of a contiguous urban growth boundary, and therefore this is going to apply to us. It's really complicated, so that's why I say I'm going to pull in Director Todd and Mayor Holzclaw for this discussion. But I think that we are circling back around to the feeling that we are part of the urban growth contiguous boundary where I was in the beginning. And I'm gonna let them have some discussion, but ultimately my goal this evening, after they weigh in with a little bit of explanation, is that I want to walk away from here tonight with some permission from the council so that I can work with the legislative committee and staff this week, and that we can get a letter sent to the Senate Housing Committee by Friday, when they have testimony on Friday morning. So that is my goal that I need to have out of this meeting. And I'll let, I think that Mayor Holzclaw and Director Todd can explain what I'm talking about in regards to this a little better possibly than I can, so everybody understands what I mean.
I'll try to take a simple crack at explaining it, and we can get more complicated if we need to. 1110 is the missing middle bill. In committee, there was an original bill and then 2 substitute bills, which were passed out on the floor. And then before it got to a vote, there was a striker that had additional changes that was introduced. And then on the floor, there's 5 or 6 different amendments that were all adopted, which resulted in gross second substitute House Bill 1110. When the bill was originally introduced, it was pretty simple. It applied to cities with a population of more than 6,000 people. It was then amended in committee at some point to what we thought was to provide that it would apply to cities between 25 and 75,000 people would have one level of requirements, and cities above 75,000 would have another. The long and short of it is there's some language that was added, and we can get into it if you like, in all the different versions that, as Stephanie was alluding to, has this language about a contiguous UGA that is being interpreted that everything is basically contiguous with the urban growth boundary for the city of Seattle, which pulls in most everything in Pierce, Snohomish, and King County, which is not how I think a lot of us understood that bill was intended. And so the bill that passed the House a week or so ago, March 6th, last week, is now in Senate committee. It's in the Senate Housing Committee for a public hearing on Friday morning, the 17th. And so the request is to get direction from the council to have myself, Mike, city manager, and the legislative committee work on putting together a comment letter to the legislature, to the Senate, to submit prior to Friday, asking for changes to clarify, either omit us from the legislation, or we have to work out what the exact request would be, but to submit a comment letter, because I think it's turning out that 1110 and the way it's evolved is not what we thought it was. Does that make sense without diving into the details that I don't think you want the semantics of the language? It's I think part of the problem is here, they were trying to push something through that could get support, and that in that effort, trying to please so many different people to support it, they've made a bit of a mess. And so that's what we're wanting, to have the opportunity to take a step back and submit some comments on behalf of the city. Questions, comments, any opposition to us putting together a letter, me working with the committee and Mike and Al and putting together a comment letter?
Comment letter specifically addresses that.
Yes, House Bill, it would be a comment letter submitted to the Senate Housing Committee. It's just in regards to there's several other issues that are confusing with the way the bill is written. It'd be asking for clarification.
So is the AWC also wanting to push for changes to the current?
I'll let Mike talk about that because he's had some conversations with the lobbyists for the AWC.
Yeah, so AWC, Carl Schrader is the one that we work with on this, and he's very good at what he does. He's been there quite a while. AWC is kind of stuck in a tough place between cities. There are cities that want to address the affordable housing issue, which our legislature and the governor very much want to address. And so they start off with, whereas we're short 1 million housing units between now and 2044, let's go do something, is what they're saying. And so they're trying to impose higher densities, more units per lot, that is distasteful to some folks and appropriate to other folks who want to say they did something about affordability. And so I would say that AWC was challenged to find a way to look for a consensus approach. And this is kind of where they've ended up with this consensus, that it is a lot of people like it. Some people hate it. Most people have no clue what's going on. Mayor and I've talked about this. I think we think a lot of people who voted for this didn't fully understand what this meant by contiguous UGA with connecting with Seattle. What it does is you look at little cities like Briar and Woodway and other cities like us that may not really have thought about this. We thought we were below the 25,000 limit, and this didn't affect us, but it does affect some folks that may not be aware of it. So AWC is not going to go and attempt to make changes because they see the winds of change happening. There's not much you can do at this point to stop it. I think that there's some of this stuff Mayor and others and I have spoken about this. This is the kind of stuff that potentially gets challenged because people go like, what do you mean you're going to take away local control for zoning from cities? But this may be a point where we are in the times that we're in with trying to figure out how to address housing affordability. Really long answer. I don't think AWC is going to fight for us. Our objective might be to say, are there other cities that if we wake them up, they would say, oh gosh, we didn't realize that affected us either. All that aside, from a historical standpoint, you look at the fact that Mill Creek is mostly built out and we have good quality housing stock, highly unlikely very much of this would actually have much impact if we were required to do this. They're not going to come tear down my house and put in a duplex there. It's just not going to happen, even my house. So I think that the reality is this is not going to have a lot of effect on us. But it is going to affect some other places. And I think there's a lot of concern and consternation about it. It comes across as kind of heavy-handed from the state, from our legislators. So I think what the mayor's proposing makes sense for us to at least hold up our hand and say, we're not real happy about this. This doesn't make sense. We wish we were excluded. We thought we were excluded. Please hear our voices.
Yeah, I would just encourage you to maybe not only draft the letter to send to the Senate, but perhaps some of those smaller municipalities near us. We do the homework and share it with them. Maybe they would follow suit.
Absolutely. And you're part of the legislative committee that's going to help draft the letter. So
Wanted to get that on the record.
fair
I
enough.
will say, I'll throw Al under the bus a little bit. There's a group called the PAC, the Planning Advisory Committee. It's a subcommittee to the Snohomish County Tomorrow group, and they met today. And Al had a chance to talk to Yorick Stevens, something or other. Go ahead and step with the microphone. The planning director from Everett, and Everett's going to be talking about this tomorrow night. So they maybe have done some research.
So I'm the state treasurer for the APA Washington chapter, and York is the president. He's also the planning director for the city of Everett. So their legislative committee was going to be giving him a letter that he was going to sign. He was going to review and sign it, that they were going to send out down to the state.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'll try to get a copy of it once it gets done. But he's been, I don't know if you know him very well, but he was on he worked in Snohomish County on the legislative stuff for a long time. So he's really well versed in some of the stuff that goes on down the state. So I kind of was picking his brain. And his opinion is that it's not the best planning practice, but that all of us across the state to one degree or another has been sort of knowing that this is going to be a problem, but not everybody has really tried to deal with it. And now it's come to a head. So now the state's trying to push a solution on everybody. And so once we get a chance to see their response that might help us with our response, but I don't know what it's gonna say.
Other questions, comments? Everyone's okay with us to proceed putting together a comment letter? Okay. Stephanie, were there other items you wanted to cover in the legislative update tonight?
No, Mayor, that was it.
Okay, that brings us to item 8B of new business.
Oh, sorry, Mayor, I don't know if Councilmember Allison or Councilmember Duque had anything that they wanted. I don't have anything else, but one of them may have something. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Go ahead.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So the Blake solution, Senate Bill 5536, it passed the Senate. It's in the House in committee, and it has favor, but the outcome is still unknown, right? It still needs to be debated, etc. It has the same key points as the bill that passed the Senate, so we're hopeful. And then the pursuit bills, there were a couple of them that didn't make it through the House. They died in the House. That was House Bill 1363 and House Bill 1513, which was a traffic safety that had some pursuit elements. And HB 1363 was about pursuits. So those two died, but there is one that's still alive in the Senate. It's Senate Bill 5352. It is strictly about pursuits. It passed the Senate floor. It has bipartisan support. It does amend the reasonable suspicion standard. And it also adds some discrete situations in which pursuits can happen. If there's been a domestic violence offense or a violent offense, or even a vehicular assault, those are classified in that bill as things that can qualify for a pursuit. And it increases the supervisory responsibility managing and overseeing the pursuits. So a little bit more guidelines around that. I think that's all that I want to speak to tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember Duque?
So the one that I've been following is the Senate Bill 5303, Public Works Assistance Revolving Account. Just update that it was moved out of the Senate and it's into the House Appropriations Committee, and we're just monitoring. That's our actionable next steps. Continue to monitor. Thank you.
Anything else? City Manager, anything else on the legislative update?
That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, now let's move into item 8B, the resolutions approving an intergovernmental cooperative purchasing agreement with Snohomish County and Sourcewell.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, staff, and to our audience joining us virtually. Tonight, we are seeking authorization to execute 2 intergovernmental cooperative purchasing agreements with Snohomish County and Sourcewell, a service cooperative created by the state of Minnesota. Over the next several years, we are anticipating purchases of goods and services to support the normal operating need of the city, as well as acquisition, replacement of aging capital assets, construction, maintenance of improvements, as well as implementing the ARPA projects that the council has adopted by ordinance number 2023-890. And so the cost and the funding sources of certain purchases would trigger strict and extensive procurement procedures that require expertise, time, and resources. And those procedures are governed by the procurement standards RCW 39.26, procurement of goods and services, our Mill Creek Municipal Code Chapter 300-02, as well as supplemented by the procurement procedures manual, and the sections 200.317 through 200.327 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Title II. Now, these standards ensure consistent, fair, and competitive processes are observed while obtaining the best quality and value for the agency. Now, joint and cooperative actions such as cooperative purchasing arrangements with other public agencies is allowed under RCW 39.34.030 and may be done so by the appropriate action of the governing body by through resolution or ordinance. And this is also encouraged by the same code of federal regulations 200.318E. So the benefit to us as a partner would provide us with greater economy and efficiency, as well as strategic sourcing of shared requisites and services. So our agency will have then access to the contracts based on negotiated prices, best value obtained through expert and streamlined procedures that either meet or exceed our requirements. And so this would also facilitate our internal processes so that we can focus more on the implementation and project completion. So in this regard, we are recommending the execution of the cooperative purchasing agreements with Snohomish County of the state of Washington and the Sourcewell, a service cooperative created by the state of Minnesota. And so this agreements would allow us to participate in the program to access the contracts and master agreements with the awarded vendors. So the execution of the purchasing agreements, or excuse me, the cooperative purchasing agreements do not bind the city to a specific purchase of goods and services. The city will still have to issue a separate purchase order or enter into a subsequent agreement with the vendor. So our recommendation would be for council action is to adopt a resolution approving an interlocal cooperative purchasing agreement with the Snohomish County and adopt a resolution approving an interlocal cooperative purchasing program participation with Sourcewell, or provide alternative direction to staff. That concludes the report. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Just one quick question. I think you answered it. If you decide not to go with the interlocal cooperative agreement and you want to go on your own, you can. You're not locked into having to go with the interlocal
Correct.
agreement.
Yes.
Okay, that's
We just have to follow the appropriate procedures for competitive purchasing.
right.
Councilmember Cavallari.
Thanks, Mayor. And this is really, I'm not sure if this is the same vendor, but this is what so people know, this is what we've done all along. We try to get in buying and purchasing pools, and this is just some new collective that has some new brand of purchasing power. So we're not reinventing the wheel here, right? It's more of the same. You're just asking to
Correct.
engage with this
Yes.
group, I guess.
So just to note that we have an existing ILA agreement with Sourcewell. However, that did not go before council. We could not find documentation that there was a council resolution or ordinance that adopted it. So we're bringing that ILA before you today. But the Snohomish County is a new one. But similarly, it's the same agreement. Yes.
Mayor, on that basis, I'd like to adopt a resolution approving an interlocal cooperative purchasing agreement with Snohomish County and adopt a resolution approving an interlocal cooperative purchasing program participation agreement with Sourcewell.
Mayor, we need two separate
was gonna
resolutions,
ask.
so we're gonna need to have them voted on separately.
Copy that. So I would move to adopt a resolution approving an interlocal cooperative purchasing agreement with Snohomish County.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? That resolution passes 7-0. Any other motions?
Mayor, I would also move to adopt a resolution approving an interlocal cooperative purchasing program participation agreement with Sourcewell.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion passes 7-0 also. Thank you. So I assume we don't need to provide the alternative direction. Okay. Okay, that brings us to shopping carts. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. Now we're into a study session regarding the abandoned and stolen shopping carts. As you can tell here by the picture, this is an issue that's started here in Mill Creek and has been addressed with council before. And so we're just going to follow up on that. The agenda, impact of abandoned and stolen shopping carts, problematic locations, current state law, shopping cart ordinances. There are several agencies or municipalities, I should say, that have adopted ordinances. So we'll give you some information on that too. The city attorney will join me in this presentation about halfway through. I'll turn the screen over to him. So abandoned carts are a growing problem. Over the past several months, there has been an increase in abandoned carts around the Mill Creek area. We're starting to see them pop up on several corners throughout the city. And most of it is associated with the high traffic areas, commonly the thoroughfares through the city. Attributed to several social and economical influences, seeing an increase in number of individuals experiencing homelessness. Rising cost of living and fuel prices have made it difficult for residents in the city to drive to the shopping centers that they're buying groceries and things of that nature, and then get back to their residence. So they're taking the opportunity to walk, save a little bit of money there. And sometimes the walk back with several bags of groceries can be difficult. Also, households are still recovering from financial losses associated with the pandemic. So the issues with shopping carts is they're somewhat of a nuisance. Visual pollution endangers the use of sidewalks and right of ways. Obviously, with these shopping carts being left in the right of way like a sidewalk, they could be a tripping hazard, a fall hazard. They are being stolen and thus creating crime, property theft. And the retrieval and cleanup of burdens city resources. We are utilizing officers and public works employees frequently right now to pick up these abandoned carts. So that's one of the ways we're addressing it right now. So current efforts over the past several weeks, the police department with assistance from public works has been able to recover several carts. I would say that, we're going out maybe once or twice a month. And in the last couple of months, we've recovered approximately 50 abandoned carts throughout the city. Some of the locations, when we first started this process, I asked one of our officers that's waiting to attend the academy, I asked him if he would go out and make a list, locate carts where we're having problems. So we started to go through that list, and this is just kind of an example of what he saw. We start talking about 11 shopping carts, 6 Safeway, 1 Walmart, 1 Albertsons, all on the west side of Lowe's. But what you'll find interesting about this, in my opinion, is that you have stores such as Big Lots, which is not even associated to Mill Creek at any location, but we're still having carts show up from those locations. So these carts are being abandoned from different cities and they're traveling all over the place. Fred Meyer up at off of 132nd, not within the city, but we have several carts from Fred Meyer that are collected and abandoned from this location. So state law is somewhat interesting. RCW 9A56270 specifically speaks to shopping cart theft. It is a misdemeanor offense. That being said, there are certain requirements of the owner of the cart to place appropriate signage in the cart. The cart must identify the cart's owner, or the signage must identify the cart's owner, must notify the public that unauthorized removal is unlawful, and it must provide a phone number or address for the actual owner where the cart can be returned. There are several anti-theft devices that these stores are actually utilizing. Some of them are associated with antennas, which are very similar to the invisible fence that you'll buy for your pet. There is a planted antenna around the property, and if the cart crosses that antenna, it will lock the wheels. Several of the larger grocery stores in the city have these devices, but yet we're still seeing the carts show up from time to time. There are ways of outsmarting the antenna. So they're getting more clever and clever all the time. These individuals that are taking the carts away from the properties. Sprouse does a really good job with their carts. If you go back and look at this sign actually does not fulfill the statutory requirement for the RCW. So an officer would have to do a lot more work for this type of a case on the theft of this shopping cart. However, Sprouse does an excellent job of signage on their carts. And this is something that would be an example of something that the officer would be able to move forward with a theft of shopping cart or RCW. So the continued efforts that we're going to continue to utilize department personnel and citizen patrol to look for these abandoned carts. We're going to work with Public Works to do the best we can to address these issues, but this is becoming a resource allocation issue. So we're looking for some help from council as to where you would like us to move on this. We're also going to be meeting with the stakeholders, these grocery store and small store chain establishments that utilize carts, and see what their take on the situation is. How can we better help them and how can they better help us? And with that, I'll pass it on to city attorney for further comment.
Okay, thank you, Chief. So let's see. A number of cities have looked at this, have had this problem. This is not a localized problem. A lot of cities have it. And one tool in the toolbox that cities have is to adopt a shopping cart ordinance. The general principles behind that are to, obviously to promote public safety, not only and to improve the city's appearance, as the chief showed that there are, it's not only litter, but it can be dangerous if it's left in a right of way or on a sidewalk, places like that. It can be dangerous not only to traffic, but to pedestrians and bicyclists as well. We want to prevent blight on public and private property if we can. And we want to also encourage the shopping center owners and the retailers in those shopping centers that have those carts to use best management practices. Some of the practices that the chief was just describing are examples of that. There are other examples of that as well. Some install bollards, some install fencing or chain link fencing around areas so that it discourages efforts to remove the carts from the parking lots. The other thing that is an important objective of shopping cart ordinances is to apportion the cost of retrieval. Chief was describing that the city is using resources, staff time to retrieve these, and the question is who should appropriately pay those costs. A number of cities in the region have adopted shopping cart ordinances. This is a list of most of them. There may be a few others, but there have been a number in King County that have done it, and also Yakima across the mountains has adopted one as well. Number of features you see commonly seen in these ordinances, and so I wanted to kind of review them for you so you get a feel for if there's an interest in an ordinance, what are the kinds of regulatory activities that it would attempt to address. Often, all of them state that abandoned carts are declared a nuisance. So there's a nuisance element in our nuisance laws also, kick in as well. Many of the ordinances have an exemption for small retailers that have maybe 5 or 10 carts, or some of them even up to 15, so that the smaller stores, which typically are not the bigger perpetrators of carts being missing, are exempted. The other thing is the signage the chief was describing is required to be on all of the carts. So it's a requirement for enforcement as well under these ordinances. All of them have provisions about if, as the chief was describing, if the city identifies and finds an abandoned cart, the city provides notification to the owner of the cart to come and get it. Then there are various differences in how long the retailer has to come and get the cart before it's removed. Some as short as 24 hours. Often you see 48, 36, or 72 hours. What happens if the retailer fails to do so? Well, the city or many cities also have engaged private companies who provide a service of picking up carts to go get them, and then they're stored usually on city property someplace, and the retailer is again contacted, and then the effort is then to get them to come and retrieve their cart. If they don't come and retrieve it after a certain amount of time, sometimes 30 days, sometimes 60 days, the carts are subject to disposal. Also, there are, obviously, if there are carts that are causing some sort of dangerous condition for pedestrians or for drivers, the city could immediately come and retrieve it. Then the question becomes, how do we allocate costs for the services that are provided to get them, and then have the retailer pay those back. In many of the ordinances, there are, I don't want to say a few free pickups, if you will, before fines and charges get into effect, but that's a common feature of a number of these ordinances. Sometimes it's 3 in a 6-month period, or I've seen 5 in a 12-month period. So there is a range of options that are there and available to be included in an ordinance of this kind. For retailers who exceed that number in a particular period of time, whether it's 6 months or 12 months, many of the ordinances require then the retailer to submit to the city a cart containment plan. And it would be a plan for how they're going to address containment of the carts on their property, and then also how they're going to deal with it offsite. There are some ordinances that require the retailers to either retain a company to go and pick up, or survey sites that are commonly found as places where you see carts, or to have their staff or employees go do that and patrol that on a regular basis. Also, there's a lot of provisions that you will see that require better on-site signage telling customers not to take the carts off-site, the physical restrictions that we've discussed. And so there are a myriad of ways that it can be included in a cart retrieval plan, but the key is they focus on-site and off-site and who's going to pick it up. Enforcement. As the chief alluded to, most of these ordinances talk about a fine procedure, and some cities have adopted ordinances that have a specific fine for retrieval. They range from $30 up to $100. Some have adopted ordinances that have an intent to do actual cost recovery. What is the time that has been used in terms of resources by the city? They look at the hourly cost of that staff time and they charge that. So we'd have to have a fee schedule that would portion those costs and times, and that could be included in an annual fee schedule. So it would be, it would be dynamic and change probably yearly. There's some of them that also have an administrative fee. So it's the time plus an administrative fee for arranging for these pickups and also for returns. There can be fines for failure to submit a plan if there was a plan required. So that's another element. Also, as the chief mentioned, there can be a misdemeanor for the person who intentionally takes the cart. There's also been civil infractions for individuals as well. I think the state misdemeanor provision is probably the most applicable and used the most often. Obviously, if we had a situation where there was a frequent amount of activity which involving shopping carts going to a specific property, we might look at other options under our nuisance code or other ordinances or other statutes if we had a serious problem that wasn't just retrieval of the carts. So with those ideas in mind and those concepts in mind, what are your options? One is to pursue at this time an engagement strategy with the retailers to achieve a voluntary compliance and get more proactive involvement of the retailers, being informed that we have specific areas that seem to be high traffic in terms of the shopping carts. Also, another alternative is to instruct staff to develop an abandoned shopping cart ordinance and give us direction to come back with you with a proposed ordinance for you to review and perfect. With that, I'll answer any questions. And the chief as well.
Councilmember Allison.
So back in, it was dark already in the afternoon, so maybe late November, early December. I went to the Fred Meyer that is right across the street from city limits, and there were no little hand shopping carts. And I asked a couple of the employees, where are all the hand shopping carts? And they told me they buy X number of those replacements every month. And they're always out because people are just walking out with them full of groceries, not paying, and they just take the cart with them. So is there any way to add that element to this ordinance as well? Is the signage requirement the same in the state statute for those small hand carts too? The retailers are suffering from that theft.
Signage requirement is a good question, Councilmember Allison, and I will check into that, but I haven't seen many of the ordinances that have the hand carry. Most of them have all been, the wheeled shopping carts, but we can certainly look into it and see if there's an opportunity to regulate that.
Councilmember Paddock.
I have two questions. One, what have we heard from the retailers around their current remediation plans? Sure, there's been some discussion with retailers about what their current plans are, what they're doing to remediate this. Do we have any feedback from?
I'm gonna hand that off to the chief.
Yeah, thank you very much. We are staged for that process. We haven't gotten to that process yet, but we have it planned for early next week.
Okay. I'd love to hear I think all of us probably love to hear the results of that. And then who's going to manage the logistics of all this?
That's a very good question. Generally, there's an element of the police department being involved and also public works. And I think one of the key questions here from a policy standpoint is what's the resource drain on developing and enforcing this? Because it's definitely going to involve some resources. Obviously, there'll be a cost recovery element to this, but the question is somebody still has to do the work.
That overly staffed public works department. Yeah. Okay.
We don't know what this is yet. Councilmember Cavallari. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Steckler, then Councilmember Cavallari.
I'll yield to Councilmember Cavallari first, and then I'll go because I know what he's going to talk about.
Well, thank you.
Save time.
Well, for resources, we already know that the police and public works are already having to manage this, and it's not really factored into their duties. So a couple of things. What I've learned is I have gone to several stores, spoken to several managers, and they purchase between 25 and 50 carts per month. They know they're going to lose those, that they are factored into the cost of doing business. So voluntary compliance is not going to happen. They're going to continue to end up on the streets until we, propose or legislate a robust abatement program. Which I've tried to address in the ordinance that I've drafted already. So I think I left off specifically on the ordinance that you'll have as just a template, any fee structure, but short of holding the merchants and retailers accountable, really does nothing if we put an ordinance in place or if we decide to put an ordinance in place. I think that what I've drafted, I think gets us there for the most part. It might have maybe a couple of different twists on it, but let's just take last month, for instance, 50 carts. Let's say it takes 20 to 30 minutes of man hours, woman hours to facilitate retrieval and disposal. And I'm probably low on that, anywhere from $25 an hour for a maintenance worker to $50 an hour for a police officer who's ever having to scoop these up. Then we're having to store them and hold them and eventually dispose of them and hope that there's compliance down the road. So we know what these carts are being used for the most part, and there's no reason the city should continue to bear the brunt of these costs. Like I said, the merchants have built in the cost of purchasing these every month. So I would encourage the council consider an ordinance, if not my language, something very similar. I think it touches everything we've talked about, even with the earlier presentation from the chief regarding encampments and homelessness. This is just another nuance of that it almost seems like we have to continue to play whack-a-mole, but the city does have to stay a step ahead in maintaining the integrity of the community. So I would encourage an ordinance at some point. Thank you.
Councilmember Steckler.
So having read through this ordinance, there's a lot of things in here I really like, and some of the things that you already said too, Counselor. I'm wondering if there's a step-by-step approach to this process as opposed to what's the ultimate perfect solution and what should we craft it. Step one, which seems to be the most logical, is making an whatever the right term is, ordinance, law, rule, that the retailers have to put these signs on their carts and on their properties, that it is unlawful to remove them from the property. So there's no second guessing that you are committing a crime when you take a cart from a property. Because right now, somebody could say ignorance of the law. Hey, I didn't know. I thought you could just take them wherever you want and drop them off, and people will come back and pick them up. So I do like that one a lot. And as I was reading through this also, if we are going to start retrieving them and collecting them and returning them, then absolutely we'd have to put a fee to that. Absolutely, we'd have to put a fee to that, because that fee should be in court, and it's going to be a pricey fee because it costs police officers, it costs time, city. Yeah, come on, let's be real. It's not going to be $10 or something. It's going to be an ugly fee to get your cart back. So it would encourage the retailer to try to keep them on their property. But step one is the signage on the carts and on the property. Save yourself time and preserve your city. Because I got to think, when Councilmember Caballari says, I'm just going to plan on I'm going to replace 25 carts, 50 carts a month. I don't really want to mess with trying to retrieve them back from wherever they've gone. I don't know what they're going to look like. I don't know how the wheels are going to act. So just let them go. And I'm going to make it part of my business plan that I have to buy 25, 50 carts every month to replace the ones that are taken away. And I can see how a retailer would think that way. It's simpler, easier. I think if you put the signage as a rule, then you are asking them to protect our environment. And when their carts show up in our environment, that is a detriment to our city. And so we, just asking them to do that alone and not holding them responsible. Hey, I found a Sprouts cart, here on 527, and I'm going to fine you for it. No, we just want to make sure that you're making it clear that it is unlawful. The other thought I had, that it wasn't in this ordinance, nothing you said, probably a dumb idea, and I don't know if any city's ever done it, but similar problem with the old. If you're really, really, really old, like me, you remember when bottles had a refund deposit, and people would, and the whole purpose of that was to collect the bottles and take them back and get some money for them. So what if we were to instigate a fee that we would pay, and maybe I'm playing up numbers here, but $10 to bring stolen carts out from the city and you bring them to us. We'll pay you, a deposit for it, and then we're going to charge the retailer probably double that to get the cart back, but to keep them off our streets so that people, I don't know. Has anybody ever done anything like that?
Not that I'm aware of it. I would have a concern though about people then stealing carts.
The carts off the
and bringing
property.
them
Yeah,
to us.
off the property itself. And you'd have to find a way to incorporate that. That's probably a bad idea, but let's go back to my first suggestion, which is let's crawl, walk, run, and get some signs on these carts and on the properties. That just seems to make simple sense.
If I could ask you a question, Councilmember Steckler, are you thinking more of a specific dollar amount fee, or are you thinking more of the cost of the actual total cost recovery approach?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
The total cost recovery would be just the hourly costs of the staff that did the work.
Oh yeah, well, that'd be the start. My start would be to cover my costs, but in reality, I'd probably have to have it slightly higher than that, because law of averages, you're not going to get 100% back on your costs. So yeah, if it costs you $10 a cart in costs to collect them and get them back to the property, you're not going to charge them $10. You're going to charge them $10 plus a handling fee, an administrative fee. Absolutely, you'd have to, or you're going to lose money. And the taxpayers shouldn't pay that.
Councilmember Duque.
Thank you so much for presenting this and sharing all of this information. I know I've been looking into this, I think, since October. And so this is very incredibly helpful. I agree with Councilmember Steckler with what many of the points he was saying. Your last slide, I think, of the presentation was the potential next steps. So for me, if answering that, I agree I think we should move forward with both. It's the continued conversations or starting of, I don't want to phrase that the way, conversations with the business owners to understand their issues, at least coming from the city's perspective, so that they know that the city is listening and that we care and that we want to make sure that we're figuring out these solutions. I think that's incredibly important. I think also from the city side, the requests and feedback on the website, there's not a category for shopping carts to call. There's, other options in the drop down or how it goes. So implementing something like that so that there's a place where people know they can to call or request, because right now it's kind of like whose responsibility is it? When it comes to the draft that Councilmember Cavallari has shared, so I think we should move forward with putting together something like this. I had a couple little like language things that I had.
I need, let's not get into that
Correct.
proposed ordinance because it's not part of the packet. So we're probably horribly confusing the public is what we're talking
Absolutely
about.
right. So based off of my reading of other cities and their ordinances, some of the things I kind of thought were things I wouldn't like for the city of Mill Creek to do. For example, is some of them say like being able to hold carts for 30 days, 6 months. We don't have the space to do that. So I would absolutely not be for any type of like long-term holding of carts. I think that should be, 3 days a week, it should be shorter. Even that, just I can't imagine being a place where they can come to pick up for that long. I mean, we're trying to park things. So I think that would be my, I'm absolutely on board when it comes to fees. I trust your experience and judgment in terms of knowing what other communities, other cities have done and what they've done successfully. I would love to continue to see the, I think one of the reasons why I mentioned the website and the request, because it's another opportunity for data and seeing what people are, if they're contacting us. I mean, it's kind of hidden in there, but, and then also just the reporting that was able to be provided about how many carts we're seeing. I think that's important for us to know, to see how big it is of an issue. Cause I think, I know kind of the hotspots, as you mentioned. I happen to live near Albertsons in one of those middle housing communities that were flagged in a previous presentation. And on our corner, that's HOA, but also cities, there's always a shopping cart inevitably there, slowly gets pushed closer and closer into the pond as whoever walks by it. So just thinking through that. So I just to wrap up, I absolutely would like to move forward with the 2 suggestion options that you had and working in both ways. So thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I think for me, I have a couple concerns and questions. First, I'm concerned about anything that would charge the business owners because people are taking away the carts. Because I feel like we are here and we keep saying we want to support small business, and it's not their fault if people are walking off with their carts and then we're punishing them for that. So I have some concerns on the impact that would have. I am far more favorable of doing some mitigation discussions with them so that they know that it's a concern for us and try to figure out together what they can do, what they would do for a solution. I'm also concerned, and what I think I hear staff underlying saying is that there is a concern about how are we actually going to find man hours to actually, or woman hours, to actually go out and make this a reality. And their workload is so full right now. So how can we craft this in a way where it would not be such a burden on them? So those are concerns I have. and I can't quite see, I'm struggling to read all the document. So if we do move forward, I would like to see us come together and craft something and maybe have some more discussion on what the repercussions of are based on different things that we would do, because I do not want to be hurting the businesses because people are taking the carts away. I also don't believe that it's just a certain demographic that's taking carts away. I watched after city council the other night, I stood there and watched a gentleman cross the street to the bus stop with a that was dressed in a nice suit, and he had his stuff walking his merry way across right in front of me with the shopping cart. So there's definitely a problem that needs to be addressed. I'm just not in favor of us charging the businesses to do so, and would like us to work with them together as a partnership to come up with a solution. Thanks.
Before I get to Councilmembers Cavalieri and Paddock, I have a few comments too, and a couple questions. Chief, have we ever caught someone in the act?
It's very rare to catch someone in the act of actually walking from a property with a shopping cart. There are individuals that are walking down the sidewalk, but you don't see them very frequently. And even then, you would have to have the elements of the RCW satisfied to move forward with the prosecution or filing of charges. So, and that includes the signage, and very few of the carts are signed adequately. So there is some difficulties in the RCW enforcement.
If we ever do, I would suggest our first step is direct our prosecuting attorney to pursue as the punishment that they are charged with community service to go out and collect carts throughout the community and return them. The second question, I park in my driveway. If I have my car stolen and it's abandoned somewhere in the city of Mill Creek and the police recover it, am I going to be charged to get my car back for the police's time for recovering my car?
You could have some tow bills associated with that, yes, depending on how the recovery is done.
The owner would be charged for that.
If the owner were to respond to the scene and pick up their car, there wouldn't be a charge.
Okay.
However, if the owner requested the vehicle be towed when it was located, there would be some towing fees associated from the impound company.
I mean, philosophically, that's what I'm struggling with is someone's getting their property stolen and we're punishing them for getting their property stolen. That's where I have a challenge with jumping right into an ordinance. My other question I had for city attorney is, in these other jurisdictions that have adopted ordinances, do we have any information as to whether or not that was the first step they took or whether they tried something else before they resorted to doing an ordinance?
I know in one case, there had been quite a bit of outreach beforehand to the retailers, but I don't know in all the others. It's certainly something we could check into before we proceed.
Because I'm kind of like mine with the mayor pro tem. You know, I respect Councilmember Cavalieri's had conversations with these retailers, but I'd like to hear from them. As a first step, I'd like to invite the retailers to come in and sit down with us so we can have a discussion. We've got a problem. How can we work to resolve this? I would like adopting an ordinance to be the last step. I'm not saying that I'm pushing that way down the future, but I'd love to see these retailers come in and have a conversation with us to see what we could try to do to deal with this issue before we resort to legislate. I'm just not the one that every time a problem arises, let's adopt an ordinance to try to deal with the situation. But there is a problem. I would like to see if we could voluntarily address it before we jump into an ordinance. And now going back to I think Councilmember Paddock was next and then Councilmember Cavalieri. Okay, Kev? Is your mic on?
Microphone, thank you. So I think what I heard was in your question about the driveway was that the owner of the car is responsible for getting that car back to their home.
Mm-hmm. Paying for the impoundment. That was
Whether
There may be some impound fees associated with moving the car if a tow company is called.
And I think from a shopping cart perspective, we're just saying, you've got to get your cart, or some of their car, back to its home, which is a fair ask. And I think what I'd like to see as a result of this conversation is a couple of things. And I don't know if this is staff or there's another vehicle, it's no pun intended, is what are these cart enabled retailers? What are they doing? What are they thinking about this problem? It may just be a cost benefit for them. It's cheaper to let them go and buy new ones than it is to deal with them. But I'd like to hear kind of what they're, as members of our community, as Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, we should hear from them and get their feedback. The second is, I think it would be good for us to understand what the cost benefits are to the city to disincentivize these retailers leaving it to us to deal with this. And then the third, and I think this is really important, is kind of a straw dog on how we do plan on managing a program. If we were to manage a program where we collect, hold, charge, return cards back, whether it's 50 in a month or 50 in 2 months or 3 months or whatever, and what sort of fee structure we'd want to put around it. But I do support a way to get the carts off the street, out of the parks and whatnot, and put the cost back to the cost causer, which is not us, the city, and most of the citizens, except the ones in suits that are going to the buses. Yeah, that's Stephanie called out.
Councilmember Cavalier.
Thanks, Mayor. I guess the first thing I would probably say is that I want to take the word that we're punishing the merchants for. I want to take that out of the conversation because this is property that belongs on their property, and it's becoming a hazard in the city rights of way. It's risk-bearing areas and pretty much just as a nuisance all the way around. So our goal is to simply get them to geofence these carts. I'd much rather not have this conversation if it were locked up and they had a robust program in place. And that's what a lot of the language kind of addresses, just basically having a robust plan in place. That means that you've done everything possible to keep the carts on the property. And if they're still leaving or finding its way off, then the criminal piece would come in there. And I'm not saying we're going to have the cops, pulling people over, pushing a shopping cart. That's just silly. There are many vendors and small businesses that actually make a living at picking up carts for stores. That's what they do. So I would hope that we would enter in an agreement, put it out for bid for a contractor to engage with the city. So our hands would be clean of it. They would do the storage, they would do the pickup, they would do the retrieval, they would do the drop off. It would be their business. With the merchants, our only end of it would be the enforcement side with the vendors at some point if we have to.
Councilmember Allison.
Yeah, so I just wanted to be on the record to say that I think engaging the business owners and coming to an agreement with them, what are they willing to pay for? Whether that be a vendor, I really don't want us to be storing shopping carts for a long period of time. I would err more on the side of, telling them where their shopping cart was and telling them they need to go get it in 24 hours, not us collecting them and storing them someplace. But I wouldn't want to, I think we need to engage the business owners that own these carts and think about those businesses that are just outside the city limits, that we wind up with carts from their businesses inside of our city limits too. So slightly beyond our city limits in that engagement. It's their carts, what can we do to keep the nuisance out of our city limits?
So what's our pleasure? Do we want to direct staff to dual track this to both start engagement with the business owners and simultaneously begin looking at drafting an ordinance that if we're not satisfied with what we hear, that we could be prepared to move on that?
Yes.
Work? Daphne, you okay with that?
Mayor?
Yeah.
Yes.
I was just looking up because a couple people have mentioned this. There is a company, Northwestern Food Merchants, that is a cart retrieval service. That's all they do. And at the same time, could we ask that we do a little research into Northwest Burn Food Merchants cart retrieval service and how we could possibly set that up in Mill Creek and what it would take to support that?
Okay.
Gotta love the internet. Geez, gotta love the internet.
Such a fancy.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start that company.
Yeah, I had to log back on. Something was going on. Okay, do you have the direction you need on this topic tonight?
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for the presentations, both of you.
Presentation.
Okay, I believe that brings us to the consent agenda this evening. Item 11A, approval of checks number 65785 through 65833 and ACH wire transfers in the amount of $840,333. The audit committee was myself and Councilmember Allison. Were there any exceptions?
No exceptions.
No exceptions. Item B, payroll and benefit ACH payments in the amount of $286,861.06. Any exceptions? No exceptions. And city council meeting minutes of February 28th and March 7th, 2023. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Consent agenda is approved. Reports, city manager.
All right, a few reports, Mayor, thank you. First one is we just got some contact, the Representative Bird's office reached out to us, just asking us more details on the funding ask that we sent regarding City Hall North, just getting more specific information on what the cost of the HVAC system would be. So we gave them an estimate. So that came in today, just a quick update. Just a reminder, we have city chat tomorrow at 6 o'clock, or is it 6:30, somewhere around that time? I don't know exactly. I think it's 6 over at the MTCA. And so myself and the deputy city manager will be there to just give a brief overview on kind of what's going to be happening in the city of Mill Creek over the next year, and then answer any questions from the participants. And that's all I have, Mayor. Thanks.
Other staff, Director Todd.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. If I could get that slide set is. Which one? It's Light Rails Community one. Joe, are you there? Could you make sure that is that available? Or somebody have the ability to share a screen to share that for me. Is there anybody in the back office helping? Thanks. Sorry, I was turning on the executive room. Let's see which one I'm trying to be. Light rail. Council, do you have that in your packets? This. You do? It's on the screen. It's in the packet, isn't it? So can someone who has the ability to share a screen, share that for me? Somebody in the back room, please.
Mike, can you tell me what presentation that is?
Yeah, it's under reports under my name. Out of the presentation folder. If someone could share the screen off
Just
of
going
the
to
packet.
into the agenda. We all may be looking at it.
If you're looking at it, we can just go ahead and go.
Yeah,
But
go ahead
I
and
think
start.
the
She'll
public would like
catch
to
up
see
with
it.
you. Yeah, they'll catch up with you.
I'm sorry, this is Joe. If you can just, whoever has the file, if you can just drop it in that folder, then we can get it online.
It's in the agenda under reports.
And just click on the hot link in the agenda.
Slick. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Perfect. Thank you.
For it so much. Appreciate that. So I want to give you a quick update. This is something that just came to us last week. So basically, like we are looking at comp plan updates. By the end of 2024, the Snohomish County Council is also doing that. And I want to report real briefly on this draft sub-area core plan policies. Now I don't know how to make this slide. Okay, so anyway, they're working on that. So the county is working on the 2024 comprehensive plan updates, and a new sub-area plan element is being introduced. Do I have slide controls? The next slide. Action. Next slide. Thanks. So this sub-area they're talking about is the sort of southwest urban unincorporated area in Snohomish County. What it is the parts that all of us have not taken yet. It's in the urban growth area, but it's between Linwood, Mukilteo, Everett, and Mill Creek, and you see it there on the white on the screen. If I can get this out of the way, it'll help even more. There you go. So that's where we're talking about. And really, the reason they're looking at this in particular over the next 20 years, remember our comp plan is over 20 years between now and 2044. Light rail will be here, and we'll have stations at Ashway, 164th, 128th by Mariner, and then over by Airport Road as a provisional station. Next slide. If you look at the population today in that area, it's 74,000 people. The projections for the land capacity it's there is 130,000 people. So there's 56,000 people that would be added. So it's going to be another city added on top of that area. Now that area is not just all in Mill Creek, but remember urban growth boundary overlaps a big part of this. So that's our interest in this. So next slide, please.
Mike, just to clarify, when you say our urban growth area, it's our unincorporated portion of the urban growth area. It's not part of the city currently.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, the unincorporated part. Yeah, in the white area. Yeah. So this urban core sub-area plan, it's kind of like a city plan. So just it has chapters much like ours does. Demographic profiles, housing, transportation, parks, recreation, open space. They are essentially putting together a comprehensive plan for this thing. They're not calling it a city, but this urban sub-area plan, core sub-area plan comes about that way. And an important one I want to mention to you is the regional collaboration is an important section. So we'll go to the next slide. And that's the one we're paying a lot of attention to. So they gave a really good presentation. Everything they're talking about makes a lot of sense. But that goal right there is the thing that we wanted to talk to you about and make you aware of. So they're saying working with regional authorities, neighboring jurisdictions, Mill Creek being one of those, Linwood being one, Everett, Mukilteo, community members and developers to achieve the overarching vision and goals of the urban core sub area. The policy themes are there, talked about interjurisdictional collaboration, plan for the development and implementation of a model code for light rail station areas. So Sound Transit is saying if you're gonna have a light rail station, here's model development codes that you would use around those areas. Collaborating with Sound Transit on siting of those light rail stations, a lot of discussions. We've talked about that before. There was a opportunity for people to talk about siting on this side or the other side of I-5 and 164, those sorts of things. Coordinating on the timing of local infrastructure improvements as light rail comes in and other things happen. Where do they put transportation or other infrastructure improvements? And it doesn't concern us much, but that policy theme for coordinating land uses along the SR 99 corridor is also important to them. But jumping back to the top, several of us, led first by Linwood and then by us, Frank and I both spoke up. This neighboring jurisdictions concept is good, except for it might be that by 2044, we have decided to annex, or Linwood's decided to annex. So it isn't just working with our neighbors. They're not just working with the neighbors like we would work with our neighbors called Everett or Bothell. It's going to be, they're going to be setting some standards and setting some model codes in place that would be covering an area we might annex. And so it gets to that annexation question. We've talked about it somewhat. I think it's something we're going to want to talk about during our process of our own comp plan. If our horizon is up to 2044, county's doing some planning because we as cities haven't done that planning. What happens if we end up inheriting something they've set codes for it? Frank put it pretty well in the conversation the other day. If you look at where we came from a residential community around a golf course, and our codes are kind of written around the CC&Rs, and we kind of grew up to be a residential kind of community. We struggle when we start talking about urban kinds of things. If they're doing planning over there at I-5 and light rail station that's based on how you write codes around tall development, transit-oriented development at I-5 at 128th and 164th, our ability to annex, there's something that has to happen in between there. And I see Councilmember Duque shaking her head, and it's kind of like, yeah, how do you think about how this works? Could be a very good marriage, but it's something we think we need to talk about. If we said we're gonna annex all the way to the I-5, we might do this differently than if the county does it. But it's a big bite. It's a huge bite. You can see that the numbers are there for the whole area. It's a lot of folks that we had added. Think about between us and Linwood and Mukilteo and Everett, there's a whole nother city there called Light Railville, or I don't know, whatever it would be. So that's what we're thinking about. Next slide. The reason we want to bring this to your attention is that right now they've opened that public comment period during March. We have an opportunity, individuals have an opportunity, everybody has an opportunity between now and March 31st to make comments about these policy statements. They're very high level. If you look at them, you go like, sounds good to me. We think Mill Creek should make a statement that says, great, we want to work with you guys, but let's think about not just talking as neighbors. Let's talk about potential switching of ownership in the next 20 years. And so I'm not exactly sure how we want to voice that, but mostly I want to bring it up tonight to get your concurrence, and staff should work towards some letter that we would put in as a city before the March 31st deadline. So between now and the 28th is your next meeting. Staff would craft some statements to put in there just to kind of put a mark in there to go along with the verbal comments we made the other day. Overall, then it was going to go to their planning commission. It'll go to eventually to county council, quite a bit of time, but this is the time to put a stake in the ground. So next slide. I think we are down at questions. Do you got questions about that area or the process or a recommendation?
Mike, a little more context. If I recall correctly, our interest is primarily in the 164 station that's tentatively scheduled to be located on the east side of northeast quadrant of 164th and I-5.
Yes, the county prefers northeast.
Right.
We prefer northeast. The Sound Transit folks might prefer something else.
Right, okay, but that area there by Walmart is part of our MUGA, but it's also one of these overlap areas with the city of Linwood. We both claim it as part of our urban growth area. A number of years ago, Linwood tried to annex it. The city fought it, said, we don't want it, but we don't want Linwood to have it. And so we somehow won that case, so no one has it. But that's why where this jumped out to me is because one of the policies Mike hasn't brought up is it talks about the station planning, engaging with Linwood on the station planning. And I'm like, well, wait a second, this is part of our municipal urban growth area as well. Why aren't we mentioned there? So those are the types of things that Mike were possibly submitting comments.
So mostly the ask is permission for us to come back in a couple of weeks with a draft letter that we would submit. And again, it's really early in the policy statement. You look at this and go, oh, that's fairly innocuous. I showed you the policies earlier. That sounds okay. But this is the time for us to start to engage and then also continue this conversation throughout our own comp plan process.
Yeah, I think it makes sense for us to be active. Any other thoughts, comments? Councilmember Allison?
Well, it makes me think back to the conversation that we had around HB 1110 and whether or not small cities are going to be able to maintain some anonymity or not. And we may need to rethink our strategy if all of what we've been living by up to now is uprooted by state legislation. So yes, I support crafting a letter.
Yeah, complicated, exactly. Yeah, if we start annexing to be a lot bigger, then we're in a different category. And as I mentioned, that Frank pointed out, it's a whole different approach to the way we go about planning.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm in favor of us weighing in on this because if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying, we're not saying that we're going to annex this in, but we're saying that we should be at the table and deciding what's going to be done there because we could end up annexing it in because it is also in our area and it's kind of not fair to just let Linwood have their say in this and not us as well when it could affect either one of us in the end. Is that what you're saying, Mike?
Yeah, I think that's really an invitation to be at the table and make sure we stay at the table and don't get skipped over. I'm not upset. We should not be upset the county for doing this planning. This is something that I said this the other day in our meetings that we Mill Creek have not gone to the table and said, let's help plan for light rail at the freeway because we're not thinking about annexation. So
the county wants
advisedly, they're just going ahead and doing this, but the county planners really shouldn't be in the business of doing urban level planning for cities. This is just kind of, nobody really wants to take it because it hasn't been advantageous to annex it yet.
Okay, I'm in favor of us weighing in because this is the time, because if we wait till later, it'll be too late. So I think we should weigh in.
Thank you.
Any objection to staff bringing back a draft letter on the 28th?
We'll try to make it so it's close enough that you can just say yes on the 28th, so we can turn in by the 31st. Thanks.
Definite maybe, brother.
Yeah, definite maybe later. Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. Any other staff reports?
One more, Mayor, I'm supposed to ask. So planning for the following months, when potentially some of you council members will be out on the days that we have meetings, particularly April 4th. I'm supposed to ask if some of you may be out, we possibly want to schedule a special meeting that third week if.
How many people plan to be out on April 4th? Or
Out,
it's
correct.
spring break for the school districts.
I sure people be here. Don't worry. Kids are long gone.
So it sounds like we might have as many as 3 or 4 out. Yeah, 3 out. Would anyone, what's the third week? What's the date of the third week?
That would be the 21st. No, I'm sorry, 7, 11.
Okay,
Yeah, 18th, sorry.
let's discuss that further when we meet later this week.
Okay,
We might just need to work the agenda so that we can talk about it.
okay, thanks.
Okay, so it
That's
sounds
all my
like what,
reports.
4 of 7 of us. Okay, turning to council reports, the only thing I had was we shot the video on Friday for the State of the City. Shout out to Scott Harder and Jody for their work putting together the raw footage. Thanks to Brian Trendler, one of our local business people and residents, for facilitating. And I understand that Scott's going to work his magic and have something for us in early April. That's all I had tonight. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Since I've already spoke on House Bill 1110, I have no report.
Councilmember Steckler.
Just a couple of committee updates. First of all, March 8th, the Arts and Beautification Board met. Spent quite a bit of time exploring ideas for, as requested, for ARPA funded projects. They are looking at city perimeter signage, a bunch of different elements, including monument signs to small informational plaques. They are also exploring the owl parade that was presented by the director or the chairman, Carmen Fisher, at the last council meeting, with the similar to the parade of cows that some of the other cities have with porcelain cows, but this would be owls, which is kind of the animal of Mill Creek, as well as an outdoor stage. Those seem to be the 3 most positive ones that a lot of people are getting behind, and they're working out some different, looking at some different vendors. Also, at the last council meeting, we added 2 new members to this board, but we still have 1 position left. So there is an opportunity for one additional person who would be interested in becoming a part of the Arts and Beautification Board, and that they can contact Jody in marketing. And then on 3/14, the left board, today met. And we found out that, unfortunately, sad news, longtime resident and supporter of our city, Brian Hyatt, is relocating to Palm Springs permanently for retirement, which is opening up an opportunity on the left board as well. And Brian has been a part of our community from everything from coaching soccer and softball and everything else to being on a number of committees here at the city, and a dedicated member of the fire department. He'll be missed, but his contributions are much appreciated. That's it.
Councilmember Cavallari.
Thanks, Mayor. I don't always like to bring things up like kind of after they happen as a reminder, but just to remind our families to be on the lookout for certain things for our parents, our seniors, and even our young people. My mother-in-law was the victim of an online predator to the tune of several $1,000s, and she's, of course, very embarrassed about it. They preyed on a widow a recent widow, and it was just an awful thing to go through. We see this all the time in what we do for a living, but we sometimes forget how tactful and how smooth and how sneaky these people are to our seniors who are just trying to live their life. They get them online, and same with our young people who just maybe have way too much access. So just and the reason I bring this up is the only reason we were able to, I don't want to say catch it, but really that's the best words. Only reason we were able to catch it and nip it in the bud with a minimal, what I would call a minimal financial impact, is because she left her phone open. And so this happens every day, day in and day out. So keep in touch with your parents, your uncles, your aunts, your children, and make sure that you're monitoring and checking in on them, and just keeping an extra eye out, because the predators, the scammers, the sneaks, the snakes, they don't take a day off. Thank you.
Councilmember Ellison.
Other than my report with the legislative committee, I have no other reports. Thank you.
Councilmember Duque.
Thank you. I just wanted to share that I enjoyed Coffee with a Cop at Starbucks. I enjoyed looking at all the pictures. I really appreciate the city's wonderful photographer skills, but also sharing it for residents to be able to see on the Flickr account. It's nice. So on that end, I like that transparency and showing people to understand. There was a lot of interest on people on our local Facebook community groups about the event. So even though we promote as much as we can, you still get people who are like, what is this? I've never heard about this. And so that's really important. So when you see that, it's not a negative of like, oh, we didn't reach them. It's we're reaching them now. So however we do so. I thought it was great. I thought it was wonderful seeing those who had to work behind the register. I had a good time. And I appreciate their involvement in being okay with doing those kind of activities. So thank you for everyone who put that on. I also wanted to share just a report. I was able to attend an HOA meeting for North Point. It's not my neighborhood, but they're my closest neighbors, and there was concerns that they had about Exploration Park. And so I have that feedback, and I'm going to connect with our city manager Yamamoto about the discussions that I had, and then how we can, because I know one of the goals is to have those connections or conversations. And so I'll follow up there. But what was interesting is also in attendance was a member from the Parks and Recreation Board. And we had a brief chat afterwards about how surprised we were by all the types of feedback that we received, or that concerns that residents had. And so I will make sure to circle back with Parks and Recreation and about those, because there are quite a few. But and that's it. Thank you very much.
Saving the best for last, Councilmember Paddock.
Thank you. Ditto on Coffee with a Cop. That was fantastic. Great community engagement, great community service. Fine coffee. Donuts were a little bit better. Appreciate that. Planning Commission regroups for the first time, I think, in a number of months on Thursday, and excited to be part of that and see what they're going to come up with. That's it.
Audience communication. Anyone like to address the council? I see a nod of heads in the audience. Anyone online like to address the council? Mr. Nelson, name, address, in 3 minutes, please.
Will Nelson, 14925 29th Drive, Southeast Mill Creek, Washington. I guess I have nothing but a compliment tonight. I was loaded for bear on the middle housing presentation, but the quality of the presentation and quality of the discussion pretty much blew my sails out of the water. So I guess that's a pretty good thing. I see the mayor has a unique smile on his face. He has rather pointed opinions about some of my comments time to time. Anyway, I would repeat Mr. Councilmember Cavallari's comments on old people getting ripped off. I was at the bank the other day withdrawing a large amount of money, or a larger amount of money, and the clerk was quizzing me on had I been influenced by anybody, and I was initially highly offended, but then realized what she was doing. So that was a good thing. The only other thing on the middle housing, save what happens on HB 110, I would once again remind the council that a lot of what you're going to do in the future on housing and population in Mill Creek will depend upon what you do with the zoning. Anyway, thank you and good night.
Thank you, Will. Okay, the council is going to recess to executive session to discuss the status of collective bargaining negotiations pursuant to RCW 42.30.140 subsection 4A. No action will be taken. We're going to need about 20 minutes. So can we have a motion to extend the regular meeting to 9, just in the off chance we need a little more time for the executive session?
So moved.
There's a motion to extend the executive session to 9 o'clock. Do we have a
Second.
second? Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The regular meeting is extended and we will recess to executive session until 8:45.
Can somebody send me to executive session, please?
I'm gonna send you in.
Thank you.
Without objection, council extended executive session until 8:50.
Naomi, you there?
I am. Okay,
It is 8:49. The council has concluded its executive session, and if there's no objections, I will adjourn the meeting at 8:49.
excellent. Thank you.
I was sitting there wondering why I wasn't being taken out of the room, and it's because I had to hit to leave the room.
Oh, is that what happened? It's okay.
I'm like, I know, look at I'm just sitting here looking at myself, and then it's I have to tell it to go.
It's okay. It worked out. It worked out.
Did we end the meeting then?
Yes.
All right.
Have a good night.